Dan Wilson, how you doing?
Doing all right. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Good, good, good.
So you're someone that uh, you know folks that I know. We've played with a lot of the same folks, but we've never actually played together, and that's something that I would like to fix sometime soon.
Absolutely. You right up the road, man.
Yeah, that's right. We're not far from each other, so hopefully we
Mm,
can make that happen sometime soon.
absolutely.
Um, but I've been following you on Facebook, and you're a tremendous player.
Oh,
Um,
thank you, man.
a lot of facility, a lot of alternating picking chops. You're
Oh, man.
pretty tempos, man. You play tempos like few guitar players are able to.
Oh, man. I appreciate that, man. Just as long as it's in service of the music, that's my thing. I
Yeah.
never, I never want to be in a place where technique limits me in a way that not necessarily that I can't play the tempo, but
Yeah.
because it's too fast, but also that I don't think to do musical things because I'm so overcome with
Right.
technique. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
I always try to keep that.
And that tends to be a challenge for someone that has the kind of facility that you have. Um,
Mm,
is it becomes the sort of go-to move. It's like when you're in a jam, I know I can always play my way out of the jam, kind of
exactly.
thing. And so it's good to hear you provide that sort of context for your technique. As we get older as musicians, hopefully what happens is we become less controlled by our talent in in as you suggested, more in service to the music,
Yeah.
to the situation. And but yeah, man, you're killing, man. Now, one thing I noticed is it seems like this is a pretty recent addition to your guitar collection. Maybe I'm wrong. You have this black guitar. What is it? It's a um,
Benedetto. Yeah.
yeah, that's right, Benedetto. That's right.
Yeah, that's
Is
pretty
that a pretty
recent.
new thing for you?
Yeah, man. I actually I got that kind of toward the end of my tenure with Joey DeFrancesco.
Yeah.
Um, the the president of the company, Howard Paul. We had a gig at the Savannah Jazz Festival, or no, I'm sorry, it was the Savannah Music Festival, and Howard, brought me to the shop. He's like, I'd like to make you a Benedetto player, and he kind of sounds like Bill Clinton, and he was like, he was like, yeah, let me take you to the shop, man, and I'll show you. Uh, I sat down, I played a couple of the guitars. I was like, wow, these are really nice. And but we went through a couple guitars because man, Joey's gig was just like a butt kicking. Like it's easy to get swallowed up on that gig. So I had to find a guitar that would, give me the warmth that I needed for uh, a jazz gig, but also, I needed some power so I don't get swallowed up by the organ, and
Yeah.
we settled on the
Yeah.
Pat Martino model, and I love that thing because I like a lot of different styles, so was able to kind of traverse those styles with that instrument.
Yeah, it's a beautiful instrument. And now that you said Pat Martino, now I recognize it. I now I recognize the guitar.
Right, right, right.
Um, yeah, but you were saying that those are great playing guitars, and I know that they're extremely expensive guitars also.
And yeah, man, if it wasn't for endorsement, I don't know if I'd be able to to really swing that. My money's not that long.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're fortunate to have you representing their company.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Thank
Yeah. Um,
you.
Joey DiFrancesco. So I interviewed him. I played with him on a gig with the Count Basie Orchestra. I was touring with them,
Yeah.
and that was, of course, that was way before the. It was before the pandemic. You know, it was before the world, stopped. Um, so let me ask you how have things been through this sort of pandemic for you?
Man, actually, it's been interesting. I'm really thankful to have all this family time.
Yeah.
Because that was, I mean, just being on the road so much. You know, it was, it can kind of take a toll on you. It's kind of a weird thing because it's so invigorating as far as like, because you know how much music demands of your imagination, and like so much of your creativity we're just kind of expected to just give, and that kind of takes it out of you. So sometimes when you get home, you're just like, just I just want to
Mm.
chill out. But
Yeah.
you have responsibilities, just as a companion, and as a parent,
Right.
so with just me being home that much, I really kind of it really kind of made me, kind of prioritize, like, family time. And I still get in my practice, but my practice is, I just don't have all the time in the world, so it makes my practice a lot more focused. I'm like, okay, man, I gotta learn these Wayne tunes. I really
Mm.
gotta get inside this harmony. So I spend like a dedicated amount of time to these really focused concepts. So it really changed things like that for me.
I like this idea of recognizing that you have limited time and structuring things in a way that maximize what you can get out of the time that you have.
Sure.
And if I'm honest, it has been the times when my time was most in demand, when I had the most stuff going on, that somehow I was able to be even more productive in the practice room. Because you got to
Isn't
be.
that
You
a
don't. You
weird
don't. You don't
thing?
have a choice.
That's such a strange thing, man. I heard Herbie Hancock say the exact same thing. Like, he was just like, I mean, like, think about all the classic things he's written. All the amazing stuff he's played, all the just masterpieces that he's written. And he was just, it seemed like he was kind of reflecting. He's like, man, like, I can't I find that these days it's hard to write new songs unless I have a deadline.
Yeah.
This is coming from one of the greatest, composers in the music.
Yeah. That's facts.
Yeah.
You know, that's definitely my situation in my composing and arranging. A couple things. One, uh, my compositions always take me way longer to do than my arrangements, and it's not because
Mm.
of complexity or you know some harmonic problem that I'm trying to solve. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not any of that. It is because I don't have a deadline. Okay,
Um.
for the for the stuff that the arrangement kind of stuff that I do, most of that stuff I'm being hired by someone to do, and
Mm.
and they have often is the case that they have really clear sort of objectives. I want it to be this long. I want the song form to be. Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video. I wanted the song form to be like this. You know, I want you to add another. Here's a reference recording. I want you to add this section here. You know, I frequently do, you know, edit and add music to you know, selections from my wife. She's a dancer and a choreographer. She's got her own dance company, and
Oh, cool.
so you know, I'm her MD, which means I do a lot of musical editing and I haul stuff for her. A lot of
Yeah,
schlepping.
right.
That's what it means. Um,
Yeah.
but in working with her, you know, she always has real specific parameters, and so I can get right in and I can just do that. I don't have very much time to do it, right? So I can get in,
Right.
I can do that, and I'm done. And there's always a deadline. It's like, well, we need it by rehearsal 2 days, in 2 days, and no problem, I can get it to happen.
Knock it out. Yeah.
But for some reason, this is what we're talking about. For some reason, if there is no deadline, and it's just like, hey, you know, I just want to be creative, and you know, when it gets a little bit too much of that, then that's when it takes a long time to get done.
Definitely. Man. Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I, it's weird, man. Like, I think the thing that one of the things that really inspires me is, you know, as the gig gets closer and I think about the people that I'm going to be playing with,
Yeah.
that's when all the ideas just start hitting me, you know. And then I get on finale or whatever and start cranking it out. But
Yeah, I'm very much
yeah, man, that's
influenced.
the cool thing. What's
Yeah, I'm
that?
very much influenced by the people that I play with, as far as like writing anything. It's like I realize who it is that I'm playing with, and it's like, oh yeah, yeah. Especially folks that you have like history with, and you know
Right.
what they can sound good on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you can set them
And
up.
that's an important thing to take into consideration. I mean, and that's the kind of the beauty of making music with other people. You know, they kind of bring out things. Like if you're, you know, kind of an effective band leader, you know,
Yeah,
you draw on the kind of the interest of the people you collaborate with. And that's
yeah,
a nice thing, you know.
yeah. That definitely is the case. I mean, you know, I I think we don't have any problem considering this, realizing this when we're maybe writing something for a singer, because obviously the vocal range, the sort of stylistic tendencies that the singer is going to have, is likely going to suggest what kinds of selections you're going to want them to do with you, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so we're just sort of taking that idea and we're just saying, okay, well, instrumentalists have personalities also. They have a sound, they have, you know,
Yeah.
stuff that they really like to stretch out on. You know, I'd
Mm-hmm.
love to hear, you know, whoever it is, I love to hear them on a rhythm changes or something, or I want to hear such and such play up tempos because I know they got the chops for it. You
Yeah.
know, that kind of thing. You know.
I wanted to ask you a question,
Sure.
because this is because you know, I checked you out years ago, and you know, I've seen a lot of your stuff on YouTube, and this is kind of the reason why this question came to me is because of playing with Joey, and I know, you know, you were very good at a young age. Um, I think there's like a YouTube video you playing like Moments Notice at like age 9, you know, and that, you know, that obviously that doesn't like that's very uncommon. That's an uncommon talent, and you know, and Joey was like that. Now, I, you know, sometimes on those like those van rides, you know, I would ask, like when we were on the road, I would ask him, you know, how, you know, being like a child prodigy affected, you know, his approach to the music, because I know the organ is just something that came really easy to him, So um, I'm sometimes when there something would present itself as difficult, he would just be like, forget it, because you know, so much musically just came easy to him. I was wondering if you experienced something similar.
Yeah, that's interesting. In my interview with Joey, I asked him some questions. Of course, Joey has perfect pitch, and he was able to very young to start picking out stuff you hear on the radio. He was just start playing it.
Yeah.
And of course, he's a multi instrumentalist. Also, I mean, we know that he played trumpet,
Mm-hmm.
um, but as of late, pretty recently, started playing saxophone, and he's a good saxophone player.
Yeah, yep. Man, his first sax gig uh was my last gig in that band.
Oh,
It was insane. And he kind of like sounded like Sonny Rollins. It was pretty wild. Yeah.
and he's really nerdy,
Mm.
about like equipment and stuff. Like, I think part of our interview we talked about some equipment stuff. But then, like, I think offline, like he was like shooting me messages asking me about certain equipment and stuff. And he's just like that. He just, whatever he gets into, he really dials it in, and he jumps all in.
Yeah.
And I think it's likely that is the thing about Joey, sort of having that sort of unusual ability to dial into stuff,
Mm-hmm.
starting really young. It wouldn't have mattered what it was, right? It
Right.
could have been anything. It's just happened to be music,
Yeah.
right? And that gave him, it gave him like an unfair advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, um, so another, and his dad's a, great musician and stuff, and
Sure.
having that in the house and hearing all the stuff around the house and everything,
Mm-hmm.
it's a great advantage. I was talking to him about sort of similar things in my sort of origin story,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where my dad is a great saxophone player, and I heard him playing around the house,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I just kept pestering him until he said, "Okay, I'll teach you."
Mm-hmm.
And I started when I was 6, and the horn was too big for me to carry. It was an alto saxophone, so
Yeah.
he designed a special stand. It's a wood stand. He called it the sophisticated racing stand, because I'm a kid, so he
Right.
wanted to have so he take the stand and you put it on a piano bench, and so then I could walk up close to the piano bench, and the weight was being supported by the piano bench, by the stand,
Mm-hmm.
and it was constructed so that my hands could still get in the places where they needed to get to play.
Right.
And so, at first it was just a few minutes at a time, and then more and more. And honestly, much of even what I'm telling you now is not because I really remember it.
Mm.
It's because of frequently questions that I ask my dad. And he tells me different things. But
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I do remember is that it's the only thing that I really wanted to do. Like lots of playing. As soon as I could handle practicing for hours, I practiced for hours.
Yeah.
And my dad was always he was very clever with the way that he described music
Right.
in my interaction with it. Instead of saying, "Hey, it's time to practice," he'd say, "Go get your horn. It's time to play."
Oh wow. Man,
So there was
it's like early conditioning.
yes,
Right.
absolutely. And this, as I say, totally an unfair advantage, because if you have your dad who has that kind of expertise giving you 3 or 4 lessons a week with
Yeah.
an attentive ear on the practice room, and with a specific philosophy that uh, tries to capitalize on what kids want to do and provides a certain context for your interaction with music in that way. It's a real advantage.
Right.
These days, because of the development of pedagogy, you have like child prodigies are a dime a dozen.
Right.
Everybody can play really young. However, because you know how to play something does not necessarily you know when to play it.
I was just gonna ask you about that because that's something that I see, you know, with and I don't want to sound like a grumpy old guy, but you know, at the risk of sounding like a grumpy old guy,
That's all right.
You know, when I see you know, kind of the players of what I kind of call the YouTube generation, because many learn on, you know, in their rooms, on YouTube, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But you know, one of the things that I see is, I mean, just tremendous talent, and tremendous technique, but that doesn't always translate to a gig, you know, and you know, thankfully for me, you know, I kind of came up in the age where the internet was just getting started, and you know, that's when I was learning to play, but I was still learning to play in church, you know, in a community setting. So when, you know, I always could play single lines fast. You know, that's something that kind of came naturally to me. But it was funny because, you know, some of the church members were very honest with me, thankfully, about how much that didn't matter. You know, you know, I remember him saying, sitting me down and saying, Brother Wilson, we're really happy that you have such facility on the instrument, but it's beginning to sound a little like patterns. It just I'm not we're not really hearing the melody. And these are not musicians. These are just church members that had my best interest at heart. They were like, yeah, it sounded just like you just playing a lot of patterns, just running up and down the guitar. I went home. I was like, huh. You know, that's, you know, that really kind of left an imprint on me, you know. And I'm not sure, because in this generation, you know, when somebody gets famous on social media for playing, you know, I mean, just blinding technique or doing something really cool,
you can't tell them nothing.
Can't tell them nothing.
That's facts.
You know, and that scares me a little bit for the development. I mean, just thinking like how great they could become, you know, because like so many of them are starting at a point that some of us couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
You know, and it just it kind of sucks to see them not receive that same instruction. You know what I mean?
You know, it's interesting. So I'm 46. And I think folks that are a little younger than me, and then folks that are a little bit older than me, maybe, I don't know, maybe a 20 year radius or something. I think there's a certain kind of advantage that we have that the folks that are learning how to play now and the folks that are, say, I don't know, 25 and younger, maybe older than that and younger, you know, that they're not going to be able to benefit from. See, the way that I learned, there was skin in the game. And the skin was, if you wanted a recording, you had to buy it.
Right.
You had to go get it. And then, because it cost you something, you burnt that record out.
Yeah.
You burnt the recording out. You listened to it over and over and over. You invited your friends over. You got a pizza or something. Hey, man, I got the new Coltrane. Or, hey, man, I got the new, whatever it was, right? Got the new Kenny Garrett joint, and you would burn a hole in the recording, quite literally. And so what happened was that became more of a permanent part. And it's like soaking, it's the difference between, chicken strips with barbecue sauce on them
Yes.
and meat that's been marinating overnight.
Yeah. Let the flavor get all in it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's different. This is a different thing, right? So you may be able to fool people by having certain technical issues worked out.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, what's really inside is going to show.
Yeah. Well, when you get in a real situation,
right?
Like I'm sure you remember, like learning entire albums. And that's the thing I try to recreate with my students. And it's cool. And I have some, it's like students that kind of range in their abilities, but with a lot of the, and no matter what level they're on, we learn entire albums together.
Right.
I'm like, pick an album you like. We're gonna learn the thing from top to bottom.
That's what's up.
You know what I mean? And it's cool because they can still they can go along with their interest, but it's kind of pushes them a little further. Like, this is not just something you can just listen to passively. This is something you have to really get inside the arrangement. You have to learn the melody. You have to learn the story behind the song. Like, I remember sitting down and learning "Light as a Feather," the Return to Forever album, song by song, and just like I remember taking apart Spain note by note, just like rewinding, boop boop. I'm like, oh, I gotta go back, boop boop, go back, boop boop, and just like, just the painstaking process, and it's kind of similar to with stand-up comedians. No matter how big they get, the process of coming up with new material is still the same. They still have to go back to some of the crappy comedy clubs they came up
That's
in
right.
and work
That's
out
right.
their material.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Chris Rock said it the best. He's like, when I go work out my new material, I go by myself. Like, anybody that's going with an entourage, is not coming to work out. You know what I'm saying? And these guys are worth like multi-billions, and they still have to come back. And if they want to, maintain that muscle, they have to go back to square one every time. That's humbling, man.
It certainly is. Back to this radius thing. The reason that this radius I was talking about, I'm 46, folks that are maybe 10 years younger and 10 years older, is because we saw the beginning of this technology thing begin. And so we have a knowledge of what things were like before that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, my dad was owned his own record company, and so we had a lot of studio equipment around the house.
Yeah.
And because of that, I got to see analog, reel to reel, and I saw him splice tape it back together. The whole thing about, we had a 4-channel tape machine, so if you wanted more than 4 channels, you had to mix down.
Wow.
Stuff like, using an actual board, patch, stuff like patch cables, using, standalone reverb units, in getting the signal, figuring out how to work out the signal path.
Right.
So what happened is when things developed and changed, there was what was it? We had an 8-channel tape machine with a noise reduction DBX noise reduction unit on it.
Right.
We went to 8-at, and with the 8-at we had 2 of those, so we could have 16 channels. And then everything went to computer-based recording. Now the thing is because I have that history, when I run into a problem with the signal path or something inside the in the computer, I can figure it out because I remember the physical, the tactile stuff. So it's less abstract, right?
Yeah.
So I understand the process. I understand how the pieces actually work together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have that advantage. So I think it's the same thing with, sort of before this sort of, before like Napster and, everything being on YouTube and everything like that,
Yeah.
where you had to actually go to the record store, but then also having the advantage of all the advancement in the technology. So if you can keep that sort of approach that you have a higher sort of value for what it is that you're studying, and you understand the significance of repetition.
Yeah.
See, there's no replacement for repetition.
Yeah.
There's no replacement for that. And you could say, we know what's said about Coltrane, who's practicing 12 hours a day. Now you could say, well, wait a minute, how much can you actually accomplish? Because we know how the human brain works, and you can't actually get any better in a certain period of time, and X, Y, and Z. Yeah, that's true. But there's also no replacement for repetition.
Man, that's a huge thing. It's funny you mentioned that because we were talking about Joey, and I bet this is similar with your development. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think his personality kind of lends itself to like you said, it's like an unfair advantage because we noticed that when he would find a joke that he enjoyed, like we would hear about it every 5 minutes, like literally, every 5 minutes for like the entire van ride. So and he would repeat it over and over and over. And I remember saying one day, "That's how you got this good," because like repetition is such a part of your person, such a natural part of your personality, that it's just like, all that stuff he worked out on the organ, it was just like he had no problem repeating it. I mean, and I think when you're that dialed in, like I think it seems like you were at a very young age, when you have no problem with that repetition, you don't get bored easily because you find something, you find little details, different new details every time you do it. Then that repetition becomes sort of a pleasure.
Yeah, I frequently tell my students that discipline is the great equalizer.
Mm.
Now, because we see this frequently, you see folks that have a lot of natural ability get surpassed and outdone. This is like a cliche. It happens so much by the cat that just is willing to outwork everybody.
Yeah.
Right. They put more hours in, more repetition, and the thing is that their repetition is not doing as much as the repetition that someone that has more natural ability that repetition would do.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter because they're doing like 20 times the repetition.
Yeah.
So they're still going to win. That's right. They're still going to win.
Mm-hmm. What's that thing that Bruce Lee said? He's like, I don't fear a man that has practiced 1,000 kicks. I fear a man who's practiced the same kick 1,000 times.
Yeah, right.
That's saying a lot, man.
Right. Okay, so one thing that folks that Okay, so there's a difference between focus and tunnel vision.
Hmm.
So tunnel vision, you don't have any control of that.
Hmm.
Okay, so now you could do something. So, for instance, gear acquisition. So, say for instance, I buy a new guitar.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to want to play that guitar a lot for a period of time.
Sure.
For the first several months, probably, it's going to be easy for me to play that guitar. It's going to be easy for me to practice, right? Because I have this new piece of gear.
Mm-hmm.
That's tunnel vision. So the thing is that I actually can't control that. I can't control that it is drawing my attention like that.
Sure.
It's like I literally have blinders on and may even actually have a hard time thinking of grabbing a different guitar. That's
Right.
the only one I want to grab right now.
Great.
That's right. So that's tunnel vision. Now, focus is the ability to remove distractions. Focus is, I have things that are distracting, and there's all kinds of stuff that's trying to pull my attention, and I have no blinders on, but I still am choosing to deal with this specific thing, right? So focus actually requires discipline, whereas tunnel vision, that just is sort of it could just be a natural disposition towards something. And so something that folks that have that it seems like they can do things over and over, and they just kind of get captivated by the next shiny thing. The shiny thing is actually controlling you,
Right.
not the other way around. And you were talking about getting bored. So, not that you were getting bored, but you were saying suggested something about being able to do an activity or whatever, practicing or working on something and not getting bored.
Yeah.
Actually, I frequently get bored.
Really?
I'm frequently bored. I'm easily bored, is what I say. So, now, let me give some context for this.
All right.
I know that is my natural disposition, is to be easily bored.
Oh, wow.
And the way that I try to balance that out is I say, okay, now first of all, if I'm easily bored, is it because I really just need more stuff to challenge me? Or is it because I have a challenge with focus? Like I'm just not, I just need to work more on focusing, right? Like it's like the thing where you get stuff started, but you don't follow it through.
Yeah.
Is it that issue?
Well, for you, I wonder, is it because do you find that with music because it seems like it came easy to you. I mean, like certain musical things, it seemed like they came easy to you. Do you think it's because of that, or is it something else?
So, it's interesting. I don't. So my dad would always tell me, he said, "There's no such thing as easy or hard. There's just more and less familiar."
Pop right on top of it, man.
Right. So because that's what we do. It's like, okay, here's this is a hard piece of music. Oh man, this is going to be this is going to be challenging. Or I got to play that in F sharp. Oh, F sharp's a hard key. Or B is a hard key. That kind of thing. No, it's just the stuff that will seem easy is the stuff that you've done more. And we can see. Let's talk about the whole what key stuff is in that being hard or easy.
Right.
So, most band and sort of orchestra music, it tends to be in certain keys. Well, orchestra music, that tends to be in in certain keys. But band music tends to be, like B flat and F. A lot of songs out of the American Songbook will tend to be in what we consider to be standard keys,
Yeah.
right? If you go into black
There you
church,
go.
you got D flat, G flat,
Yeah.
A flat. You playing in all these keys with all the time.
Yeah.
If you go into an evangelical, like a guitar driven church, you're going to have a lot of songs that are in E, A, D, G, and
Yeah.
B, right? And then the relative minors of those keys, right? And and if you take folks from any of those communities and you put them in another context, that's going to seem hard,
Yeah.
right? But it doesn't seem hard to the folks that grew up doing that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the same thing, if you take them and put them in, playing in F and in C and stuff like that, it's like, oh man, C is hard, you know? So it totally is. It just has to do with what you've been around.
Yeah.
To answer your question about has it been easy, or did things sort of come easy to me? I don't know that I was really thinking about it in terms of easy or hard. I was just that whole repetition thing, and and I just whatever it is that I want to do. Now, the way that I try to keep myself honest with the board thing is, that's why I play more than one instrument. That's why I am interested in composing and in teaching and a variety of other things. But I just have to make sure that I'm not sort of doing it like tunnel vision, and that I actually have a disciplined approach to it. So then I can sort of capitalize on, I can take advantage of that sort of whatever that natural tendency that I have, but just make sure that it's not controlling me.
I see.
At least that's what I try to do. That's what I say to myself.
Oh yeah, man. You mentioned about the key thing, and if and if you've ever played testimony service on like especially in a black church, you're gonna play in every key.
Yes.
Every single key. Like man, some of those Tuesday and Friday nights, when people would get up and sing, and tell you about their week, and then they break out in the song. You got to
got to find whatever key they're in.
Yeah, and some nights it'd be like F sharp, whatever, and that's what really kind of made me comfortable in all the keys. It's just playing that testimony service. It's just like, oh, it's just here. It's just
right.
Like you said, familiarity. You just get used to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Guitar is one of those instruments where, it's like, everybody plays guitar, right? But they can't really play the instrument. Really, they require the use of the capo. They learned about 4 chord shapes,
Yeah.
And it's one of those instruments where it can either be one of the maybe not that challenging things to get like a sort of base level of thing, and then if I get these 4 or 5 chords together, I can sing all of these songs and play.
Yeah.
Or maybe the most difficult instrument, that exists because of all of the string skipping and all of the fact that all of the notes are, all over the neck everywhere, and
it'll be like
music and stuff is challenging.
It'd be like 4 notes in the exact same register in across 4 different places. That's why it's so difficult to read. For guitar players to read, because they're like, well, I can play this in 4 different places,
Right.
But and that's a cool thing. I love the documentary about Andre Segovia called the Song of the Guitar, and he talks about people who write for the guitar, and he's like, mostly I find when people write for the guitar, they mostly make me laugh because it's impossible to write for the guitar if you don't play it and you don't play it well, and he's so correct. Like there's so many like little weird idiosyncrasies on the instrument,
Yeah.
that I've been playing it 20 some years, and I'm just like, oh, that's possible.
Mm.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it seems like with the piano, the harmony is just kind of like laid out. It's right there in front of you.
Yeah.
Of course, there are beautiful details on the piano that you can only be revealed by years of practice, but the guitar seems like more, they're not as readily apparent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And in order to play, um, a lot of that bop stuff, um, I think Coltrane has had a powerful influence on the development of extended techniques on guitar.
Definitely.
Um, I was talking to Frank Gambale. I interviewed him recently, and he's one of these guys that pioneered his sweeping thing. But
Sure.
his mastery of it is extended far beyond the sort of typical metal arpeggios.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
he's playing all kinds of crazy stuff, and
Right.
because he's sort of thoroughly mastered that technique, he can play all of this stuff that you're not supposed to be able to play on a guitar.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like it's like stuff you didn't even realize was possible. It's like some guy comes along, or some musician comes along, and you're like, oh man, that's possible. That's how I feel about George Benson. I feel
Yeah,
like, you know and even Give Me the Night pop star George Benson. You
yeah,
know, there for me, there has not been somebody who embodies, you know, such a wide range of what the instrument can do.
yeah,
Um, he not only is he just technically perfect, but
yeah,
there are some really incredible details to his phrasing.
yeah.
The fact that he can play a really really fast line and adjust the volume in the middle of the line.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost, like, if you hear his intro on Affirmation, you almost don't hear the pick. It's so smooth, and
Yeah.
it's so it sounds like somebody's either like pressing a keyboard or
Mm,
blowing the notes through a horn. Hey, dude, can
right.
you pass me the charger? Sorry, I gotta make sure my computer doesn't die while we're talking about all this heavy musical information. Thanks.
While you're doing that, my three favorite guitar players are George Benson, Frank Gambale, and Alan Holdsworth. Those are probably my three favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, that's not to diminish the contributions of anyone else or to suggest that they are maybe of lesser greatness,
Yeah.
but those are my three. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing that is of the three, uh, it seems to me that the picking capability of George Benson, you can only do that if you have a certain, like, you could shed for your lifetime and you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's something there he has some sort of, the way that he is constructed,
Mm-hmm.
the way that his hands are made, the way that the the alternate picking that he can do, that
Mm-hmm.
it's just doesn't make any sense. I mean,
Absolutely.
it defies all possibility.
Yeah.
It's so incredible, and it's not just speed, the feel.
That's it. That's it. That's it. Because I tell my students all the time, like, there's a major difference in having good time and having a good time feel. There's a
Right.
huge difference. They're
Yeah.
two completely different things, and there are possibly guitarists out there that can play faster than George,
Right.
but man, it's not gonna feel like that, man.
Right.
You
Right.
know, his just the ideas he has and the placement of those ideas. Um, like even when he's playing at a blazing tempo, like that live version of Olio, it's maybe I don't know upwards of 400 beats per
Yeah.
minute, and even then his phrasing is clear. He's leaving space, in all the right places. I mean, just to be able to think that fast is really incredible. But to have such incredible technique to not necessarily just play a string of notes, just not to just machine gun your way through that, but to
Mm.
actually play clear phrases is
Right.
like frightening. To that's the word that comes to mind for me.
Yeah. Definitely frightening. Um, yeah. I think George Benson has screwed up a lot of guitar players.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
man.
and what I mean by that is, you know, you're never going to be able to pick that fast, and it's probably better to change your like sort of concept of picking.
Oh man.
More economy picking, more just other stuff, because it's not going to be physically possible for you to ever be able to play the way that George can play.
Yeah, man. And it's funny, man. I the first time I met him was on a gig in Phoenix, and Joey's such a ball buster, man. We played that his tune clockwise, you know.
Mm,
And man, that was one of the highlights of my life. I mean,
mm,
because when I was coming up, like I used to play just wear that whole album out. We talked about learning whole albums. Oh man, I just used to the George Benson Cookbook and It's Uptown, which was the one that Clockwise is on. Man, just used to wear those out, and just to play that in front of them. No, there's no way in the world I'm gonna be able to play it like him or on that level. But just to play that and see his reaction, like he turned
mm.
to his son. I wrote this song, and and he came and hung with us backstage, and yeah, young fella, you got your. He said something to me that really just I'll carry it with me just for the rest of my life. He's just like, young fella, you got your own vibe, and I was just like, man, that's such a relief, Mr. Benson, because I've been trying to imitate you for like 15 years, you know, and just to hear that, man, is really really humbling and affirming at the same time.
I was talking about the alternate picking thing. You're one of the few players alive, I think, that can actually pull off that alternate picking and with that kind of feel.
Oh man.
A la Benson. You're it's really amazing, the clarity in your lines,
Oh,
um, and the precision and all of that stuff that you're talking about that you admire about Benson. I can hear the influence on your playing.
oh, man, I appreciate that, man. I think there's a there's kind of a lack of pedagogy in
Mm,
that sense. On how to really to pull that off with a pick.
yeah.
Um, but it's similar as I grow and as I get older and as I teach more. Um, has a lot of similarities to how drummers control the bounce.
Right.
Because each each upstroke is a rebound.
Mm-hmm.
When you alternate pick, when you follow through to the next string, each upstroke is a rebound. So it's all one motion, one snap motion. When I watch drummers do the push pull thing,
Mm.
same concept. It's just it's all rebound. When we can get really fast, it's all rebound.
Are you familiar with this guy, Troy Grady?
I'm not.
I just want to make sure I'm not messing his name up.
Mhm.
Oh, it's gonna tell me in a second, I think. Here we go. Yeah, Troy Grady.
Mhm.
He's got this thing called cracking the code, and
Mhm.
it's all about uh, plectronics. About picking.
Mhm.
And so he's gone around the country and he's put this apparatus on great guitar players' guitars and had them, do what they're, just play.
Mhm.
And it's amazing because he has this unusual ability to sort of decode what their actual technique is, what their position, what their arm position is, with their wrist, if it's coming from more of their elbow or if
Yeah.
it's coming from more of their wrist.
Right.
And this whole thing about how speed, I think a mistake, and this is a pedagogy that almost everybody says this, but I think it's wrong.
Mhm.
And that is, if you want to be able to play something fast, play it slow.
Mhm.
Okay? Now here's the reason that that's wrong. When you play something slow, the physics is completely and totally different than when you play it fast.
Mhm.
Okay? So when you play something slowly, all of the motions tend to be exaggerated. So there is more distance between for if you're talking about picking, more distance between the pick and the strings,
Right.
right? And the sort of arc of motion is there's more of a radius.
Mhm.
But as you speed up, that radius starts to flatten and the distance starts to tighten.
Definitely.
And so, in a very real sense, even if you're playing exactly the same thing, at every single tempo, it is different.
Mhm.
And this is why it's important to practice things at multiple tempos
Definitely.
because it might as well be a completely different thing that you're playing.
Yeah.
If I'm playing it at 100 versus playing it at 200 or playing it at 300, whatever. And obviously, it's easy to imagine that with the big gap between those tempos. But
Yeah.
I would argue that even when the differences between the tempos are smaller, more gradient,
Mhm.
you would still experience the same thing. So actually, the way to learn how to play fast is actually by playing fast.
Yeah.
Now that sounds strange,
Yeah.
and it's against the sort of common pedagogy.
Yeah.
And one thing that is absolutely true about the if you want to play fast, play it slow, is that if you can't even play it correctly slow, then you won't be able to play it fast.
Right. Right. Right.
That is true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not negating that fact. Yeah.
Right. But that's the only thing that's true
Right.
about that statement. That's the only aspect that is true. But I've heard and even when Troy Grady, even when he is asking people to describe their picking technique or what it is that they're doing, in most cases, they're not even aware the fact that when they play it slowly, their technique is completely and totally different than when it is when they play fast.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And that's the thing that you, man. Uh, geez, I keep going back to the gig with Joey, man. Man, some of those tempos, some nights were like that was a real eye opening thing because I was, I always thought like, oh yeah, I'll be cool at fast tempos. Man, when we got like above 400, I started sweating, I mean,
Mm.
and the drummer at the time, Jason Brown, was very comfortable, like 425, like just comfortable up there because he did it all the time. And
Mm.
I was like, man, how what's going on here? And how can I stop falling on my face, man? It's
Mm.
like, man, Tony Williams said it, man. Only way you learn how to play fast is playing fast every day. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I started doing it every day. And I started where is this? Let me see if I can find this thing. I remember the exact uh time where I felt like I could hang with them, because usually they would just leave me in the dust. Uh April 16th, 2016 in in Moscow, Russia. So like we're playing, you remember that tune, The Bridge by Sonny Rollins?
Mm.
So so I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
So way upstairs.
Yep.
Now keep in mind, Jason is smiling the whole time, and I have a pretty intense frown. So easy. Now that's like, I remember sweating. Like that feeling you get when you got diarrhea, you start to get hot. So yeah, Joey sounds amazing, and I remember I played a solo that night. Yeah, right there. That's
Yep.
moving, And
Yeah.
so I've played a solo, and I've been, after the gig, I've been shedding in my hotel room, like just with the metronome, fast as it could go, and
Right.
I remember taking a solo. I'm like breathing. I'm like, breathe, and I remember thinking, oh man, it's actually working, and that was just an eye opening moment, man. Just like, because there's one gig, I bring this up to Joey all the time, like we did in Ferrara, Italy, where we played that tune like much faster than this recording,
Mm.
because he let Jason take an open solo in the beginning, and I remember when he started the time, I looked at Joey and his eyes got real big, and he was like, he started going like this. I'm like, don't expect much from me. And Joey handled it. He handled the tempo. I mean,
Yeah.
he went into some type of zone that, one of those Joey zones, and I played the worst solo of my career. And like I mean, like I cannot get a note out. It was just like, have you ever seen a guitar before? Like that type of solo. So
Mm.
to my knowledge, there was nobody in there YouTubing. So maybe that will just be left in history. But that was also an important moment.
Yeah.
Just to, get it together, man.
Yeah. Playing tempos, and I spent a lot of time practicing tempos, especially when I was in college.
Yeah.
There's an Aebersold play along called "Burnin' Only for the Brave," and I played through that thing over and over and over. It was
Yeah.
just one of those parts of my routine,
Mm-hmm.
and I called a lot of tempos on gigs. And matter of fact, I got a sort of like a reputation for playing tempos.
Mm.
And so it got to the point where I would call a bass player and he would be like, yeah, I'll do the gig, but can we kind of lay off on the tempo? It's like that.
Yeah.
And, but, I just remember, and of course I don't play as many tempos these days as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I play tempos now, I always, it's like, yeah, I need to be playing these tempos more.
Sure, sure.
There's like a, I did a lesson. I used to do these lesson of the week videos, and this is from years and years and years ago. And I
I
did
remember
one of them.
those.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I did one called "Tempo is Relative," and in that I took a rhythm changes, and I started like 150, and then I kept speeding it up by 20 or 40 BPMs or something
Mm-hmm.
until I was playing at 400. And then I said, okay, now we're going to select a target tempo, and we're going to say the target tempo is going to be 300. Now, 300 is still fast,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But after you've been playing at 400, 300 is not fast.
No, 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 no.
And a few things happen. One thing is, yeah, there's a physical thing and just like managing tension
Mm-hmm.
and relaxing and keeping like your shoulders down and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's an endurance, sort of feeling your body, learning what your body feels like when you're playing at a certain tempo.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also you're demystifying tempos.
Right.
So part of playing tempos is confidence.
Right.
And then another aspect of playing tempos is your actual brain wave activity.
Mm-hmm.
How fast those synapses are firing.
Right.
And so as you're gradually speeding up, you get to certain tempos. It's like, I gotta think faster, and I have to be more precise.
Yeah.
You get up to that 400 tempo or whatever it is. Now your brainwave activity is firing very efficiently,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you drop down to 300, you'll actually play things that would have never occurred to you to even try at that tempo because the tempo doesn't seem like it's fast anymore.
Right. That makes me think. I think some of those faster tempos are way more difficult for a lot of people than, like, I say, like 150, because when you get around those slower tempos, like you said, everything is magnified.
Right.
So when you get in here, it's getting, and you have to, that's when you really can hear if somebody can swing or not,
right?
Or if somebody can groove or not, or because when you get to a certain tempo, everything pretty much straightens out. When you get up here, ding 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 ding, everything's pretty much straight.
Yep.
But man, when you're here and you got to ride that out, man, that takes some serious. That takes a different kind of strength, to make those phrases really sing and really sound musical.
Well, it's more exposed. It's for the same reason that a ballad is one of the most challenging things to do.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I played and even on a ballad, even just thinking about stuff like tone and maintaining that good tone throughout into the end of the note, and playing longer lengths of notes and the additional endurance that it requires to be able to do that. I have a classical a recording that I recently released. Actually, it was 2020, January 2020. It was released, and it's all Marcel Mule commissioned works, and so really significant works, pieces, and they're all really challenging to play, and some of them are just like a billion notes and really just like challenging, like the extremes of the saxophone. It's all of that. But one of them, Bozza Aria is actually like a freshman. It's like a first year piece for most conservatories, and it's deceptively difficult, because if you play it at the tempo it's actually intended to play, it is so slow and requires so much embouchure control and just control of every aspect of the note.
Yeah.
That it's just like it's so exposed. It's so bare,
Right.
you know, and so in a manner of speaking, though it's usually a first year piece, most of the time folks playing that as a freshman, they don't play it at the tempo that the prescribed tempo. They play it quite a bit faster because it's easier to play faster, a lot easier.
Man, that's saying something, man, about you know, just playing those tempos where everything's exposed, because that's why I loved the ballad side of Coltrane so much.
Yeah.
I mean, man, just when you hear him come in on Blue and Green, you know, be-da-da, booty-ya, booty-ya, you know, it's just like one of the most beautiful moments in music, because you know, this musical giant that was capable of all that, you know, just all that power, was able to just condense it down into like one chorus of just pure beauty. That's like, man, that's some heavy stuff, man.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my two favorite saxophonists on ballads are Coltrane and Sonny Stitt.
Ooh.
And now it just so happens that those are probably my biggest influences.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
So that might be the case anyway.
Yeah.
So I could be biased, but what's interesting is Coltrane is so reserved on a ballad. He's minimalist. Reserved is not the right word. Minimalist, right? He's very deliberate and understated, right? And some of the time he doesn't even take a solo. He just plays the melody, and it's just the melody, and it's that thing in his sound, the control he has. It's so killing.
Yeah.
Stitt, on the other hand, he is embellishing, and he's all of the at all of the cadential points at ends of phrases, he's adding these flourishes, you know, and it's interesting. They have sort of almost opposite approaches to the way that they play ballads. One of the beautiful things about jazz, about our music, about Black American music, is that there's like all of this space, you know, there's all these possibilities, you know, there's all of this. When I say space, it's space for different personalities, space for different approaches.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
It's what keeps it always interesting. And though, as I mentioned before, that you know, I often describe myself as being easily bored. I can't stay bored for very long because there's so many possibilities and opportunities.
That's a cool thing about music, man. Even our favorite musicians, like you mentioned, Train, and one of my guys obviously is Bird, you know.
Yeah.
And one thing that I hear from Bird that I didn't hear, I never got from Train's music, is humor. You know what I mean? And which was cool. I mean, not to say Train's music was like lacking in any way, but I never, you know, and all the, you know, the people that knew him or wrote about him said he was a very serious person. But with Bird, man, I hear a ton of humor in his playing. You know,
that's very interesting, and I totally would agree with that. Bird, did you see the film by Clint Eastwood, Bird? It's just called Bird.
Yeah. Was that the one with Forrest Whitaker?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, I have several issues with uh, the sort of leaving out all of the hours in the practice room he must have been spending to totally change everything forever.
And he said that himself in interviews.
Yeah.
You know, he said it himself in interviews. He said, you know, there was a period I was playing, 12 hours a day for a period of 3 months. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like that, you know how crazy that is. Like, I
It's
mean, yeah, and you're right. They left that part out, like to make it seem like it just kind of descended upon him, you
right.
know, magically, and it ain't like that, you know.
Now, I this term genius is so overused. In fact, even when it's used to describe child prodigies, it's overused. It should never be used in that context because genius is something that you would have to prove over time.
Mm-hmm.
In some sense, I consider the term genius to be uh, similar to the reserved way that I would use it is the same reservation that I would have using the word saint
Mm. Wow,
or
that's
prophet,
interesting.
right?
So oh, like to see if it manifests over time. So
That's
okay,
right.
that's interesting to hear. That's interesting to hear because, uh, yeah, I always wondered. I always wondered, like with child prodigies, like when people call them geniuses, is it crippling them? You know, in a sense, like when you kind of throw the world at them, like before they fully develop. You know.
Well. Think about this. I think the danger of that is, yeah. I mean, you create. You're setting them up in a way that's not fair. It's an unfair setup.
Yeah.
But if you in some way compare it to sort of child stars and how
Hmm.
disproportionately they are totally jacked up as adults.
Yeah, 'cause they just peak, and everybody just treats them differently. Ah, man, yeah, that's terrible. I never thought about that.
Yeah, uh, one of the challenges as an educator is when you have these students that have a lot of natural ability, not to get enamored by their capability and then to therefore treat them differently.
Yeah.
Often is the case that folks that have a lot of natural ability or display an unusual skill set early, they're allowed to remain underdeveloped in other areas
Mm-hmm.
because people facilitate that. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
well, but they can play. They can play the saxophone now, or they
Right.
can play the keyboard. So we're going to let them, and they're not actually saying these things, but it's like, well, they got their thing, so we're not going to worry about the fact that, you know, they have no social skills or that,
Yeah. That's
you know,
just what they needed for the art. They're just tortured for the art. Yeah.
uh,
That's I never got down with that, man. And that's one of the things that I appreciate. We're working with Christian McBride. He, I mean, like, it's like best for me, best bass player in the world.
he's bad, super
But
bad.
I never get a sense that, you know, he's never like, oh, I've been there, done that. You know, I've arrived. You know, never like not eccentric. Very easy to be around on the road. So that is a clear example for me. Like, it ain't got to be like that, man. You don't
No,
have to be a hypersensitive, temperamental
right.
individual to be great at something. You know,
That's right.
um, yeah, I think that's a lesson that many kind of some of the young cats with, some of these attitudes could benefit from. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't. It does not have to be like that. You can be a productive member of a productive and a functioning member of society, and just be a cool person and still be great at what you do. You know.
Yeah, man. So, what do you have coming up, man? What's on the docket? Uh, I want you to plug some stuff. I want folks
Oh,
to come and check you out.
oh shoot, man. I just released my third album. Well, really my first album on a major label on Mac Avenue Records. It's called Vessels of Wood and Earth. Um, and I'm really proud of that record, man. We had a good time. It was Jeff Tane Watts on drums, bassist Marco Panacea, pianist Christian Sands, and vocalist Joy Brown. And yeah, I'm really proud of that record. That everybody did an amazing job, and it's produced by Christian McBride, and I play a couple duos with McBride on that record, and yeah, it's out, across all the platforms.
Right.
And let's see, I have my first kind of road gig with. Well, I have one with pianist Emmett Cohen.
Yeah.
He does that every Monday thing.
Yeah.
I'll be on the May 3rd one, and then we had on May 7th we have a gig with McBride in Ridgefield, Connecticut. So that'll be kind of be like my first live performance in front of people since, let's see, I had actually had one during the pandemic in November, but it was all masked, and this will be the first one since then. That before November, it was like maybe February. That was like my last gig, so I've been kind of itching to play in front of a live audience.
Yeah, the two things that I missed the most initially about the pandemic. Um, well, the three. I'll say the three things. There were three things.
Mm.
Um, uh, One of the first things I missed honestly was the gym because they
Oh,
shut shut everything down for a couple months,
right.
and um, and I'm a health I'm a fitness advocate, and I'm a 5 days a week guy in the gym, and
Wow.
not just because of the physical benefits, but also because of the mental mental health, man.
Sure.
It's a great stress reliever, and
Yeah.
as a person that has dealt with anxiety, um, it's been one of those things that's helped me to kind of keep my wits about me, and
Sure.
and keep everything moving. Another thing, of course, I missed was the stage. You know,
Oh,
the audience. That um, that there's just nothing like the reaction, the response of the audience.
yeah. It's like a social thing. Like
Yeah.
like in the shed, you can only hear yourself for so long. It's just like, all right, I know what I sound like. I know I knew what I was gonna do before I did it. But like to be like the conversation we're having back
Yeah.
and forth. There's like give and take. Like you ever talk to somebody who talks so much they start asking themselves questions. Like bro, you don't even need me here. you know, like, but it's nice when you get like a give and take. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The audience just gives you something. And, Miles famously or infamously said, don't call it jazz. It says it's social music.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that one of the, I think one of the battles that's being fought in the academy um, uh, is actually a battle between art music and commercial music.
Mm.
And of course, social music, what jazz is of course going to fit more in the commercial category.
Mm-hmm.
In art music, the stuff that you don't clap between movements, you know, the stuff that really only survives due to the academy and due to government subsidy,
Mm-hmm.
and for orchestras around the country. Um, you know, I think that's the real sort of battle, and I think it used to be that the sort of racial sort of bias of the musicians that created jazz was more of an overt and pretty direct kind of even visceral sort of reaction that the Academy had
Mm-hmm.
to jazz. But more and more, I think that that's not really the issue. That's not the primary issue. The primary issue is that there's a struggle between art music, music that requires government subsidy, and music that can stand on its own.
Yeah.
And there's some, I think that's really what it's a more nuanced sort of issue
Yeah.
than it once was.
Well, man,
But the
but
other thing, yeah, go ahead, Ben.
oh, yeah, well, I think the cool thing about uh, especially Black American music is
Yeah,
that it comes from where it comes from.
yeah,
Like regardless of however it might be gentrified. I was talking to somebody. I was talking to my wife about this the other day about how just like the ridiculousness of gentrification and how you know when we are when an area is gentrified, when like the culture of an area, reaches a certain sort of a peak. Like you had like the Harlem Renaissance. You had like all the amazing culture, all the amazing music that came out of like the South Bronx and Brooklyn and places like that. All these kind of hubs of Black culture. When they reach a certain peak, people are like, "Wow, that's crazy!" Hip hop becomes this huge thing. Harlem Renaissance becomes this huge thing. Jazz becomes this huge thing, and then the area is gentrified, and they're like, "Oh, what are we gonna do with these people here?" They move them. But the thing that they don't realize is the culture goes with us, like wherever we are, and I think that's such an important uh, thing to keep in mind. The music comes from where it comes from,
yeah,
and it might not be, a glamorous area, but I think the more that, uh, we as a culture realize that, then I think the music will be valued like it deserves. You know, uh, and for me, black music exists in a continuum. Like I see, Stevie Wonder. I see his music as standards. You know, and I play him like that.
yeah,
I spent a lot of time learning his songbook. Just like I did. Like Rogers and Hart. Or
right,
or like Dwayne Shorter. All that stuff exists in a continuum to me. It's all filtered through African American culture. You know,
yes, absolutely. And um, in that statement that Miles made, I think he's implying all of that.
definitely.
Social music,
Yep.
it's from the culture,
Hmm.
and it's not just about this sort of hyper personalized get your stuff out, get the
Yeah.
stuff that you want to say out. It's about the way that the audience interacts with the creation of the music.
Sure. Sure.
The reception of it actually impacts the creation of it. you know
Hmm.
you're thinking about incorporating them into the performance, as opposed to if they're here or not, it doesn't matter.
Right.
This is going to be the same anyhow.
Yeah.
Kind of an approach.
Because it's great to have audience participation, especially when they can clap on the beat. Oh man, you get an audience that, man, like I had a gig in Philly one time. One of my first gigs with McBride. Man, the whole tune, the audience kept 2 and 4. It was the greatest feeling. Like, it reminded me when I was playing back in church.
Yeah.
I used to, man, when the audience would keep that groove, man, that
Yep.
there's nothing like that, man.
Yep. Let alone good soul clapping.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. That's it. The double clap. Yeah. Yep. Yes, sir. Oh my gosh, man. It's the greatest thing, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I said the first thing was the gym, the second thing was the stage. The third thing was conversations. Conversations like this one. And that's actually why I started this series.
Yeah.
And I think this is episode 140.
Oh, snap. Man, that's really cool, man.
And but it's been great because it's it's facilitated these really interesting conversations, and talking with people that I admire and respect. And I don't get none of us have been able to be on the stage as much as usual. And there's a sort of camaraderie in developing backstory, there's all of these things that are happening every time you get on a gig with the same person.
Yeah.
It's like there's all of these other memories and things that are gathering, and you can say things that to someone else would seem out of context and like, I don't understand what you're saying, but they'll understand exactly what you're saying, because they have that shared history.
Sure.
And so yeah. All right, man. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thanks again for doing this. And
thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man. This has been a fascinating conversation. I think folks are gonna enjoy this.
Oh,
I certainly did.
Oh yeah, same here, man. Let's play together, man. Let's make it happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
All right, man.
All right, brother. Have a good one, man.
I'll see you.
Peace.